Potato, potato. Doesn't matter how you pronounce it, we're talking about seed potatoes. Let's go. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. In today's episode, I am super excited to help you guys never buy seed potatoes again. And so if that sounds like it's going to be something exciting for you, hopefully you'll stick around and check out this episode because I think you'll really enjoy it and maybe you'll learn something. So when it comes to buying seed potatoes, typically you'll go off to your greenhouse or garden center, or you'll buy them online and you'll buy what is called a seed potato. Now, what is a seed potato? So a seed potato is a potato that's grown with the intention of being regrown. What farmers will do is they will harvest a potato that is slightly undersized with the intention of being regrown next year. Now this is very different from your standard method of seed production because if you take, say, a tomato or even lettuce and you want to grow it for seed, what you will do is you will take the healthiest and most large crop and continue to grow that for seed production. And then once the plant actually produces seed, you will pick the healthiest and most plump and viable looking seeds from that lot. And this essentially is you selecting out the fittest so that you have a better chance of having a healthy and strong crop the next year. This is so much different when it comes to seed potatoes, and that's because potatoes are a tuber. They are an energy store. They are not an actual biological seed. And so when it comes to these potatoes, farmers basically want to maximize their storage space. And so what they will do is they will harvest an undersized potato, typically around the size of an egg or slightly larger than an egg, but not a fully sized potato. And what that will do is will actually save on space by like 50%. And then what it will also do is it will decrease the overall surface area of the potato while maximizing the amount of available eyes on the potato. And that's because every potato, when it forms, has the same amount of eyes that it will have when it's fully mature. So if you take a potato when it's, say, 3 months old, it will have, say, 5 sprouting points for eyes to form. If it's at 9 months old, it will still have the same amount of sprouting points. It'll just be much larger, and so farmers will instead take those and send those off to market and sell them because they're going to get more return for their, more bang for their buck. Whereas the smaller potatoes, they will save those for next year. And so a seed potato is ultimately just an undersized potato that is used for planting again. Now, another thing that a seed potato has that is special is a seed potato is basically what they consider a true, unsprayed, unadulterated potato. A lot of farmers will spray their potatoes with sprout inhibitors. And those sprout inhibitors, basically, it's an enzyme that is sprayed on the surface of the potato, and it reduces the growth enzyme on the eyes so that they don't do what they would do naturally, which is to grow eyes. Because in the grocery store, if they have eyes, typically people don't buy them. And so you want to go with an organic potato if you're buying from the grocery store, which is what I did, or you can grow them from your own potatoes. If you have grown potatoes in the previous year, we have videos on how to store them over winter. You can actually take them and use them for your own seed for next year. And that's what's really great about growing your own is you can just use your own seed stock. So if you don't have any potatoes, go to the store, buy some organic potatoes. They will not be sprayed with the sprout inhibitor. After that, you're ready to go. All right, so the next thing you're going to need if you're going to make your own seed potatoes is you need a tray or a box. Now, if you're going to go with a box, it has to have a mesh bottom so that airflow can get underneath. A lot of farmers will actually put them on what they call chitting trays. That's chitting with a CH, not an SH. So, if you think I'm cursing at all of you, there's an actual term, it's called chitting. And that's what we're doing is we are chitting our potatoes. And you can actually replicate this very simply with a 2x4, take some hardware cloth, wrap it underneath the bottom, and then basically keep it on little blocks so that there's airflow underneath. Works out great, but it can be a little bit costly and not everybody has those. You can go to your local garden center and just pick up these trays. These holeless seed trays are awesome. You can also buy the ones with holes, but I just had these on hand. And they have these ridges, which is awesome because they're not going to be setting directly on the surface. They're going to be setting, if I take a potato, they're going to be setting on here, and there's plenty of room for airflow to get underneath. and the fact that they're fairly shallow trays allows for lots of airflow, which is super important when you're sprouting eyes and forcing eyes on your potatoes. So once you've got your trays, the final thing you really need to do is get some type of material that holds moisture but is not going to hold on to too much moisture. I love these little dishcloths here. They are awesome. You could use dishcloths. You could use paper towel. Paper towel will dry out a whole lot faster because it's just thinner and holds on to less moisture, but you can use paper towel. You can also use burlap. A lot of farmers, when they're doing large amounts of seed potatoes, will use burlap. And burlap is just a natural fibered material that is woven into like a thatched kind of a crisscross pattern. So it holds on to water really well, but it's pretty strong and durable. You can use that as well. Whatever you've got on hand that's going to hold on to moisture. I've literally heard of people taking like a dish towel, or not dish towel, but like a bath towel, right? That you dry yourself off with, and just using those to drape over. They're going to be fine. What you want to do is you want something that's just going to cover them, hold the moisture near the potatoes, but not too much, because potatoes will rot very easily if you give them too much moisture. Now I'm going to compare this to when we did sweet potatoes. If you remember, we actually planted them in some potting mix, and we're keeping that potting mix very damp. And that way, it's going to help to force the slips to form on the sweet potatoes. Now, if you do that with potatoes, you'll end up with a big, moldy, rotty, smelly mess. You cannot do that with potatoes. And that's because potatoes are very susceptible to rot, especially indoors. And so what we're doing is we're keeping moisture to a minimum, and we're going to basically force the eyes using what they consider ambient humidity. This is very important because potatoes will sprout eyes in an ambient humidity of above 65%. So we're not actually keeping the potatoes damp, we're keeping the air around the potatoes damp. This is the big difference between sweet potatoes and potatoes. All right, so it's as simple as this. You're gonna take your potatoes, do not wash them, do not scrub them, do not do anything to them. We're just gonna sit them in the tray, just like this. Now, for our purposes, we're using store-bought potatoes. These are a little bit larger, actually this one is quite a lot larger, than what you'd find with seed potatoes. Now, it's not going to affect the overall seed potato whatsoever because we're getting these from the store. Now, these are organic russet potatoes, meaning these will not have been sprayed with a sprout inhibitor, but you have to remember, a seed potato grower will have harvested this much smaller to conserve on space, weight, and things like that. It's just a better business model to sell a smaller potato. It won't affect the overall yield whatsoever. So we're going with slightly larger potatoes than normal. Now, it's also very critical to give them space. Now, this is quite a lot more space than you'd really need to give them, but I'm gonna do 2 trays anyways. And so I'm kind of right in between, right? You can give them a lot more space. It's not gonna affect anything. It'll just be wasteful on space. But if I were to put all the potatoes in here, it'd be a little bit too crowded. So ideally, what you want to go with is you want about a 1/2 inch of spacing between each potato. And this is just, they're basically touching each other. In this tray here, they are quite literally touching each other. So you don't want that because again, you want that ambient humidity to be all around the potatoes. So we're just kind of going to space these out. So now all we have to do is take our cloths. It's like we're putting them to bed for the night, but we're putting them to bed for the next 6 to 8 weeks. The nice thing is potatoes, unlike sweet potatoes, can sprout eyes in darkness and they do not need light. Your potatoes, what we're doing is we're essentially keeping them from turning green. They will turn green if they're exposed to sunlight. So the darkness is great because it's going to keep them from turning green. It's going to help them to sprout eyes, which they can do in the darkness. And those eyes will eventually be the future plants, but they're going to be future plants once you plant them out in the garden. So they can stay in the darkness for 6 to 8 weeks and be totally fine. This is why a lot of people find that their potatoes will randomly sprout eyes if they like store them in like a cupboard or something in their sink, below their sink or whatever. They open them up, they forgot about them, and all of a sudden they have this giant tangled up mess of eyes. And that's just because they left them in the darkness for long enough and the ambient humidity and temperature were right and they sprouted eyes. Now, when it comes to temperature, you just want to keep them above 65 degrees. Anything warm average household temperature is going to be totally fine. You don't need anything very special there. The final thing that we're doing, once we get them covered up with whatever material is going to hold on to the moisture, is we're going to dampen it. So we're going to go through here and we're going to keep this pretty damp. And we're going to do this about every other day. We're going to come in here and spray with water as needed. If it still feels damp, we're not going to spray. We don't want too much water, but again, we just want to keep the ambient humidity at around 65 to 70%. So the ideal moisture you're looking for is one that is noticeably damp. If you were to take it and like wipe something down, you'd see moisture, like you could wipe a table down with this, right? But not one that if you squeeze it, you're only getting a few drops, right? You don't want this to be just saturated with water. If I squeeze it real hard, that's like all the water that's coming out. And I just moistened it. So within a couple hours, you might not be able to get a single drop out of this. But that's how damp you want this material to be, because if it's too dry, you're not going to have the humidity around the potato that you need. And if it's too wet, you're going to have things like mold forming. So that's basically about it. It's pretty simple to do. Just very simple process. The only thing that I was going to make a mention of is that once your potatoes have eyes that are about 1 inch to 1.5 inches long is when they're ready to go out in the garden. You don't want to necessarily just keep them under here for eternity because they're going to get too long. And if they get too long, they get very fragile and you don't want to break the eyes. So the ideal time to kind of move them out is right around that 1 inch to 1.5 inches long mark. And also you want to wait till the conditions are right. So I typically will plant my potatoes out in the garden around mid-April or so. You can still plant them before your last frost date. I typically will plant mine about 2 to 3 weeks before my last frost date, which is right around mid-April. And then that way it gives them some time to kind of get established in the soil before the growing season begins. So really super simple, and I hope this helps. I hope this helps you save money. I hope this helps you grow big or go home. And I really also hope that if you did enjoy, you'll comment down below with something you learned and subscribe if you haven't already. We have tons more content coming out, and it's always such a pleasure to bring this content out to you guys because I know that it really does help in so many ways. So as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow big or go home. Take care. Bye.